The rain didn't just fall, it attacked. Each drop exploded against Tahlia Richardson's windshield like liquid bullets. She gripped the steering wheel with fingers that had once been steady enough to draft the most intricate architectural blueprints, but now trembled like autumn leaves in a hurricane. Another contraction seized her, stealing her breath and making her dark cocoa skin glisten with perspiration, despite the October chill. The pain started as a whisper in her lower back, then crescendoed into a symphony of agony that made her vision white out for terrifying seconds. Not yet, she gasped to her reflection in the rearview mirror, to the universe, to the tiny life inside her that seemed determined to make its entrance on the worst possible night. Please, not yet, not like this. But even as she whispered the words, Tahlia knew she was fighting a battle she couldn't win. The contractions were coming every 3 minutes now, each one stronger than the last. She pulled into the emergency lane, hazard lights casting red shadows across her sharp cheekbones. Her braids, usually arranged with meticulous care, hung loose and disheveled around her face as she fumbled for her phone. The screen's blue glow illuminated tears she didn't even realize she'd been crying. Her finger hovered over the contact list, scrolling to the name she'd been avoiding for 4 months, Cole Martinez. The father of her child. The man who'd looked at her growing belly like it was a tumor and told her he wasn't ready for this kind of complication. The coward who'd suggested she take care of the problem before walking out of her apartment and her life, with the casual indifference of someone discarding an old newspaper. But desperation made people do foolish things. Maybe, she thought through the haze of pain, maybe when faced with the reality of his daughter being born, he'd find some fragment of decency. Maybe he'd remember the woman he'd once claimed to love. I can't do this alone. The baby's coming and I'm terrified. I need you. Her thumb hit send before courage could abandon her completely. Then she tossed the phone onto the passenger seat like it had burned her and pressed her foot to the gas pedal, navigating toward Chicago General through streets that seemed to shift and blur with each contraction. What Tahlia didn't know, what she couldn't have known in her panic and pain, was that her trembling fingers had betrayed her. The message hadn't gone to Cole Martinez, the man who'd shattered her heart and abandoned their child. It had gone to Cole Bennett. 23 floors above the Chicago streets, in a penthouse office where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city's glittering skyline, Cole Bennett sat surrounded by the trappings of success. Architectural models of his construction company's latest projects lined mahogany shelves. The Morrison Hotel project was behind schedule and over budget, 2 things that didn't happen on Cole Bennett's watch. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, scanned the reports again, searching for solutions in columns of figures and timelines. That's when his phone buzzed. Cole glanced at the screen, expecting another update from a site foreman or a late-night crisis requiring his immediate attention. Instead, he saw a name that made him pause, made something in his chest shift in a way that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the woman whose brilliant mind and magnetic presence had been quietly driving him to distraction for months. Tahlia Richardson. He knew her, of course. Knew the way she could transform a room simply by walking into it, her slender frame carrying itself with the kind of confidence that came from surviving in a field dominated by men who questioned her every idea. Knew the sharp intelligence that sparkled in her dark eyes when she challenged his designs. The wit that could cut through pretension like a heated blade through butter. Knew the graceful way her hands moved when she sketched, the passionate fire in her voice when she defended her architectural visions. What he didn't know, what he'd been too professionally distant to notice, was that the slight changes in her silhouette over recent months meant she was carrying a child. What he couldn't have guessed was that she was about to face the most vulnerable moment of her life. But as he read her message, as the raw desperation bled through the screen and into his consciousness, Cole Bennett felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the overwhelming need to protect someone other than himself. Without hesitation, without considering the implications or the professional boundaries he was about to obliterate, he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. The drive to Chicago General felt like navigating through a fever dream. Cole's hands gripped the steering wheel of his black Range Rover as he wove through traffic with the precision of a man, accustomed to making split-second decisions worth millions of dollars. But this wasn't about money or construction deadlines or quarterly profits. This was about a woman who'd somehow become important to him without him realizing when or how it had happened. The hospital's fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh, unforgiving shadows. The smell hit him first. That distinctive cocktail of antiseptic and human suffering that made even the strongest people feel vulnerable. Cole Bennett, who'd built an empire on the foundation of never showing weakness, felt his carefully constructed armor crack as he approached the reception desk. "I'm looking for information about Tahlia Richardson," he told the tired-looking receptionist. "She's an employee of mine, and I received a concerning message that she might be in labor." The woman's fingers clicked across her keyboard with practiced efficiency. "Yes, Ms. Richardson was admitted earlier this evening. She's in the maternity ward." She looked up at Cole with the kind of weary smile that came from working too many night shifts. "Congratulations. It appears she delivered a healthy baby girl about 30 minutes ago." The word congratulations hung in the air like a question mark. Cole opened his mouth to correct the assumption, then closed it again. What was he supposed to say? That he was just her boss who'd received a mistaken text message? That he'd driven across the city in the middle of the night for a woman he barely knew? "Room 314, the receptionist continued. "But visiting hours are over except for immediate family." Cole straightened his tie, feeling the weight of the lie he was about to tell. "I'm her emergency contact." The lie rolled off his tongue with surprising smoothness. The receptionist nodded and buzzed him through, and Cole found himself walking down sterile hospital corridors toward a room where a woman he'd been quietly fascinated by for months had just become a mother. He stood outside room 314 for a full minute, his hand raised to knock, paralyzed by the magnitude of what he was doing. This wasn't just crossing professional boundaries. This was launching himself into orbit around someone else's personal catastrophe. He was inserting himself into the most intimate, vulnerable moment of another person's life. But then he heard it, a sound that shattered every rational argument his mind could construct. A soft sob, muffled but heartbreaking, the sound of someone drowning in an ocean of loneliness. His knuckles connected with the door before his brain could object. "Come in," came a voice from within, tired but musical, even in exhaustion. Cole pushed open the door and stepped into a scene that would be permanently burned into his memory. The room was small and sterile, dominated by a hospital bed where Tahlia Richardson sat propped against white pillows. Her usually immaculate appearance, the carefully arranged braids, the sharp business attire that commanded respect in every meeting had been replaced by the raw honesty of exhaustion. But even disheveled, even vulnerable, she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Her dark skin seemed to glow in the harsh fluorescent light, her sharp cheekbones more pronounced but no less striking. Her eyes, those fierce, intelligent eyes that had challenged him in countless meetings, now held a mixture of confusion and something that looked dangerously close to hope. Beside her bed, a tiny bassinet held the smallest human Cole had ever seen. "Mr. Bennett?" Talia's voice was barely above a whisper, confusion evident in every syllable. "What are you doing here?" Cole found himself frozen in the doorway, taking in every detail of the scene. The way her hospital gown had slipped slightly off one shoulder, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of hours of labor. The protective way her hand rested on the edge of the bassinet, even in her exhaustion, maintaining a connection to her child. "You sent me a message," he said finally, his voice gentler than it had ever been in any boardroom. "I was concerned when you didn't respond." He watched the emotions play across her face like clouds crossing the sun. Confusion gave way to understanding, which immediately transformed into mortification so complete it made her close her eyes and turn away. "Oh God," she breathed, her voice thick with humiliation. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I meant to text someone else. This is..." She trailed off, unable to find words adequate to express her embarrassment. "Don't apologize," Cole said, stepping further into the room. Something about her vulnerability, her obvious mortification, made him want to ease her discomfort. "Are you okay? Is there someone I should call for you?" Talia's laugh was hollow, bitter as black coffee. "No, there's no one. I told my parents to wait until after she was born to fly in from Atlanta. I didn't want them to worry, and I thought..." Her voice cracked. "I thought I could handle this alone." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Cole found himself studying her face, seeing past the professional facade to the woman underneath, scared, exhausted, but determined not to break. A soft whimper came from the bassinet, and Cole watched Talia's entire being transform. The vulnerability melted away like snow in spring sun, replaced by something fierce and primal and beautiful. She reached for her child with movements so tender they made his chest tighten with unfamiliar emotion. "She's beautiful," he said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised him. "What's her name?" "Maya," Tahlia replied, her voice filled with wonder and exhaustion in equal measure. "Maya Hope, Maya Hope," Cole repeated, testing the name on his tongue. Something about the way it sounded in his voice made Tahlia look up at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see straight through all his carefully constructed walls. The baby settled against her mother's chest, tiny fingers grasping at nothing, and Cole found himself transfixed by the picture they made together. There was something Madonna-like about the scene, something that spoke to parts of himself he'd thought were permanently buried, under years of corporate ambition and emotional distance. "Mr. Bennett, Cole?" Tahlia corrected herself, her voice soft. "I still don't understand why you're here. You didn't have to come. This isn't your responsibility." Cole moved closer to the bed, drawn by something he couldn't name. When someone reaches out for help, you don't ignore it, even if it was meant for someone else. The honesty in his voice, the unexpected gentleness from a man known throughout Chicago's business community for his decisive, no-nonsense approach to everything, made Talia's breath catch. This wasn't the intimidating CEO she'd known from afar, the man whose rare smiles could light up an entire boardroom and whose approval she'd been quietly seeking for months. This was something else entirely. Someone else entirely. "The father?" Cole asked quietly, though something in his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Tahlia's expression hardened, the protective walls slamming back into place. "Gone," she said simply. His choice. Cole's jaw tightened, and for a moment, something dangerous flashed in his green eyes, the look of a man who'd built an empire by never backing down from a fight. His loss, he said firmly, and his biggest mistake. The conviction in his voice, the way he said it like it was an absolute truth rather than empty comfort, made something warm unfurl in Talia's chest. She studied his face, trying to reconcile this compassionate stranger with the businessmen she'd admired from afar. "Why do you care?" she asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. "I'm just one of dozens of employees. This isn't your problem." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her feel exposed and protected at the same time. "Because," he said finally, "no one should face something like this alone. And because you're not just another employee, Tahlia. You haven't been for a long time." The admission hung between them like a bridge across an impossible distance, fragile and terrifying and full of potential. Neither of them moved, neither of them breathed, as if the slightest motion might shatter the moment and send them tumbling back into the safe, professional distance they'd maintained for months. Then Maya made a soft sound, breaking the spell, and Cole stepped back, running a hand through his sandy brown hair. "I should go," he said, though he made no move toward the door. "You need rest." "Cole," Tahlia called as he finally turned toward the exit. He paused, looking back at her. "Thank you for coming, for caring." He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Get some sleep, Tahlia, both of you." After he left, Tahlia lay in the hospital bed holding her daughter and staring at the door through which Cole Bennett had disappeared. Something had shifted in those moments, something that made her feel less alone than she had in months. Outside her window, Chicago glittered in the pre-dawn darkness, a city of millions where two people had just discovered that sometimes the wrong number could be exactly the right call. Tahlia woke to sunlight streaming through hospital blinds and the soft sounds of her daughter's breathing. For a moment, she existed in that hazy space between sleep and consciousness, where the previous night felt like a fever dream. Surely Cole Bennett hadn't actually stood in her hospital room, hadn't looked at her newborn daughter with something approaching tenderness, hadn't spoken to her with a gentleness that made her heart skip beats. But then she noticed the arrangement of flowers on the windowsill, white lilies and pink roses in a crystal vase that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Beside it sat a small, perfectly dressed teddy bear wearing a pink t-shirt that read, "Welcome to the world, Maya Hope." The card was simple, expensive cardstock with just a few words written in bold, masculine handwriting. For Maya and her incredible mother, C. B. Below that, a phone number she didn't recognize. Tahlia sank back against her pillows, a mixture of gratitude and mortification washing over her in equal waves. Of all the people to accidentally text during the most vulnerable moment of her life, she'd chosen her impossibly handsome, intimidatingly successful boss, a man who probably had assistants to handle his personal shopping and schedule his emotional responses. Maya stirred in the bassinet beside her bed, tiny fists unfurling like flower petals. At barely 12 hours old, she already showed signs of her mother's determination. When she wanted something, she made her preferences known with admirable clarity. "Good morning, beautiful girl," Tahlia whispered, lifting her daughter with the careful reverence of someone still amazed by the miracle of this tiny life. "Did you sleep better than Mama did?" The truth was, Tahlia had barely slept at all. Every time she'd closed her eyes, she'd seen Cole Bennett's face. The surprise in his green eyes when he'd first entered her room. The unexpected gentleness as he'd looked at Maya. The intensity in his voice when he'd said she wasn't just another employee. A soft knock at the door interrupted her reverie. "Come in," she called, expecting a nurse. Instead, Dr. Sarah Chen entered, followed by a resident Tahlia didn't recognize. Dr. Chen had delivered Maya after taking over from another physician mid-labor, and her calm competence had been a lifeline during the scariest hours of Tahlia's life. "Good morning, new mama," Dr. Chen said warmly, her voice carrying the slight accent that hinted at her Korean heritage. "How are we feeling today?" "Sore," Tahlia admitted, exhausted, overwhelmed. She paused, then added with a small smile, "But happy." "Really happy." Dr. Chen nodded as she began her examination, checking the incision from the emergency C-section that had been necessary when Maya's heart rate had dropped during the final stages of labor. "Everything looks good," she said after a few minutes. "Healing nicely, but I am a bit concerned about your blood pressure. It's still elevated." Talia's heart skipped. "Is that dangerous?" "Not immediately, but I'd like to keep you for observation for another day, maybe 2. Postpartum hypertension can be serious if not properly managed." The practical part of Talia's mind immediately began calculating the cost. Another day in the hospital meant more expenses, more time away from work, more complications in a situation that was already overwhelming. But Maya's health, and her own, had to come first. "Your husband seemed very concerned about this last night, Dr. Chen continued, making notes on her tablet. "He asked a lot of very thoughtful questions about warning signs and postpartum care. It's wonderful to see such an involved father." Tahlia opened her mouth to correct the misunderstanding, then stopped. The explanation, that Cole Bennett wasn't her husband, wasn't Maya's father, was actually her boss who'd received a mistaken text message, seemed too complicated for this moment. And something about the word husband associated with Cole's name made warmth spread through her chest in a way that was probably dangerous. "He's very caring," she said instead, which wasn't technically a lie. After the doctors left, Tahlia found herself staring at the card beside the flower arrangement. The phone number seemed to beckon to her, but what would she say? "Thank you for the flowers? Thank you for pretending to be my husband to hospital staff? Thank you for making me feel less alone in the scariest moment of my life?" Before she could lose her nerve, she picked up her phone and typed a simple message. "The flowers are beautiful. Thank you for everything." The response came so quickly she wondered if he'd been waiting. "How are you feeling? How's Maya?" Something about the immediate reply, the concern evident even in a text message, made her smile for the first time since waking up. "Tired but good, she's perfect. Doctor wants to keep us another day for observation. Anything I can do to help?" The question hung on her phone screen, loaded with implications. There were 1,000 things she needed help with. Calling work to extend her leave, figuring out how to manage as a single mother, dealing with the crushing loneliness that threatened to overwhelm her every time she stopped moving. But how do you ask your boss, even one who'd shown unexpected kindness, to help navigate the wreckage of your personal life? "I should be fine," she typed back. "But thank you for asking. Tahlia." Even in a text message, she could hear the slight edge of command that made him such an effective leader. "What do you need?" The directness of the question, the way he'd used her first name, made her pause. This was Cole Bennett, a man who'd built a construction empire through decisive action and refusing to accept fine as an answer when problems needed solving. "I need to call work," she admitted. "Let them know I'll be out longer than planned. And I need to figure out everything else." "Consider work handled. What's everything else?" Tahlia stared at the phone, torn between gratitude and the fierce independence that had gotten her this far in life. She wasn't used to accepting help, wasn't comfortable with the vulnerability that came with admitting she couldn't handle everything alone. "Single motherhood," she finally typed. "Pretty sure there isn't a manual for that." "No," came the reply. "But there are people who care about you. You don't have to figure it out by yourself." The words hit her with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had cared about her well-being without expecting anything in return? When had anyone offered help without making her feel weak for needing it? Her phone buzzed again. "I'm bringing lunch, real food, not hospital cardboard. Any preferences?" "Cole, you don't have to—" "Preferences, Tahlia." The authoritative tone made her smile despite herself. Even in kindness, Cole Bennett was used to getting his way. "Anything from Rossetti's?" She typed back, naming an Italian restaurant near the office. "I've been craving their minestrone for days." "Done. See you at noon." Tahlia set the phone aside and looked down at Maya, who was studying her mother's face with the serious concentration of someone trying to memorize every detail. "What do you think, baby girl?" she whispered. "Is Mama making a mistake letting someone care about us?" Maya's response was a tiny yawn that seemed to suggest she was far too young to worry about such complicated adult problems. But as Tahlia settled back against her pillows to wait for Cole's arrival, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful, like the moment before stepping off a cliff, unsure if you'd fall or learn to fly. Cole Bennett stood outside room 314 at exactly noon, holding a bag from Rossetti's and questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. In the harsh light of day, with his rational mind fully engaged, the magnitude of what he was doing became crystal clear. He was bringing lunch to an employee who'd accidentally texted him during labor. He'd lied to hospital staff about being her emergency contact. He'd spent the morning rearranging his schedule and thinking about a woman who technically worked for him, wondering if she'd slept well, if she was in pain, if she needed anything. This wasn't just crossing professional boundaries. This was obliterating them with the thoroughness of a controlled demolition. But as he raised his hand to knock, Cole heard the soft sound of Tahlia's voice from inside the room, talking to her daughter in the musical cadence mothers used with newborns. Something about that sound, the tenderness, the absolute love contained in each word, made every rational argument his mind could construct crumble like sandcastles against the tide. "Come in," she called after his knock. Cole pushed open the door and felt his carefully maintained emotional distance take another direct hit. Tahlia was sitting up in bed, her hair freshly braided. When had she found time for that? Wearing a soft purple robe that made her dark skin glow. Maya was cradled in her arms, and both mother and daughter looked like something from a Renaissance painting, all soft curves and gentle light. "You came," Tahlia said, and something in her voice suggested she hadn't been entirely certain he would. "I said I would," Cole replied, setting the food on the rolling table beside her bed. Rossetti's minestrone, as requested, and their focaccia bread, because hospital food is a crime against humanity. The smile that spread across Tahlia's face was like sunrise after a long night. "You're going to spoil me with actual flavor." I was beginning to think my taste buds had died from institutional food poisoning. As she spoke, Maya made a soft sound, not quite a cry, more like a question, and Tahlia's attention immediately shifted to her daughter. Cole watched the transformation, the way Tahlia's entire being focused on this tiny person with laser-like intensity. "She's hungry again," Tahlia said, then looked up at Cole with something that might have been embarrassment. "I'm sorry, but I need to." "Of course," Cole said quickly, turning toward the window to give her privacy. "Take your time." Behind him, he heard the rustle of fabric, the soft sounds of a mother caring for her child. It was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with attraction, and everything to do with the fundamental human experience of nurturing life. "You can turn around," Tahlia said after a few minutes. "She's content for now." When Cole looked back, Maya was nursing with the serious concentration of someone tackling an important job. Tahlia's expression was a mixture of wonder and exhaustion, love and uncertainty. "Is it supposed to hurt this much?" she asked quietly. Cole moved the visitor's chair closer to her bed, settling into it with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to making himself comfortable in any situation. "I'm probably not the best person to ask about breastfeeding specifics," he said with a slight smile, "but my sister mentioned that the first few days are the hardest. Your body and Maya are still figuring each other out." "Your sister has children?" Tahlia asked, seeming grateful for the distraction from her discomfort. 3. 2 boys and a girl. Cole's expression softened. She says the learning curve is brutal, but it gets easier. Most things do. There was something in his tone that made Tahlia study his face more carefully. Most things? Cole was quiet for a moment, his green eyes focused on something beyond the hospital room. Some losses never get easier, he said finally, but you learn to carry them differently. The weight of unspoken pain in his words made Talia's chest tighten. She wanted to ask what loss he was carrying, what had put that shadow behind his eyes. But Maya chose that moment to finish nursing, and the spell was broken as Tahlia adjusted her robe and reached for a cloth to burp her daughter. Here, Cole said, standing. May I? The question surprised them both. Cole Bennett, CEO of a construction empire worth hundreds of millions, asking permission to hold a 3-day-old baby. But something about the careful way he approached, the gentle confidence in his movements, made Tahlia nod. Cole lifted Maya with surprising expertise, settling her against his shoulder with practiced ease. The sight of this powerful, intimidating man cradling her tiny daughter with such tenderness made something shift deep in Talia's chest. You're good at that, she observed. Like I said, 3 nieces and nephews. You learn quickly or you get banned from family gatherings. He patted Maya's back gently, rewarded by a small burp that made him smile. She's strong. I can feel it in the way she holds her head up. Strong like her mama, Tahlia said without thinking, then felt heat rise in her cheeks at the familiar way the words had come out. Cole looked at her over Maya's head, his green eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Yes, he said quietly, like her mama. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities neither seemed ready to acknowledge. Then Maya made a contented sound, and Cole carefully transferred her back to Talia's arms. Your soup's getting cold, he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. They ate in comfortable quiet, interrupted only by Maya's soft sounds and the occasional comment about the food. But beneath the surface normalcy, Tahlia was hyper-aware of everything, the way Cole's eyes crinkled when he smiled, the careful way he avoided any mention of her absent ex, the fact that he seemed in no hurry to leave despite surely having a dozen important meetings waiting for his attention. Cole, she said finally, setting down her spoon. Can I ask you something? He nodded. Why are you really here? And don't say it's just because I texted you by mistake. You could have sent flowers and called it professional courtesy. You didn't have to come, didn't have to stay, didn't have to. She gestured helplessly. All of this. Cole was quiet for so long that Tahlia began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. 6 years ago, he said, I was supposed to marry someone. Elena Rodriguez, she was a pediatric surgeon. Beautiful, brilliant, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Tahlia felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she stayed quiet. 3 weeks before the wedding, she called it off. Said I was married to my work, that she'd always come second to Bennett Construction. She wasn't wrong. He looked down at his hands. She married her residency supervisor 2 months later. They have twin boys now. I'm sorry, Tahlia said softly. Cole shook his head. Don't be. She made the right choice, but it made me realize that I'd built this incredible professional life and had nothing else. No family, no real relationships, nothing that mattered beyond quarterly reports and construction timelines. He looked up at her, his green eyes vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. When I got your text, when I realized you were facing this alone. He paused. Maybe I came because I know what it feels like to be alone when you shouldn't be. And maybe I stayed because for the first time in years, I felt like I was somewhere I was supposed to be. The honesty in his confession hit Tahlia like a physical blow. This successful, powerful man who seemed to have everything was admitting to the same loneliness that had been eating at her for months. Cole, she began, but he held up a hand. I know this is complicated, he said. I know I'm your boss and this situation is unprecedented, and there are 100 reasons why what I'm feeling is inappropriate. What are you feeling? The question escaped before Tahlia could stop it. Cole's gaze met hers, intense and unflinching. Like I want to be the person you call when you need help. Like I want to teach Maya to ride a bike and help her with her homework and walk her down the aisle someday. Like I want to wake up next to you every morning and fight with you about architectural designs and grow old watching you be the most incredible mother I've ever seen. The words hung in the air between them, Impossible and terrifying and more honest than anything anyone had ever said to her. Talia's voice caught. That's a lot to feel for someone you barely know. I know enough, Cole said simply. I know you're brilliant and fierce and kind. I know you challenge me in ways that make me better. I know that watching you with Maya makes me believe in things I thought I'd given up on. Tears she hadn't realized were building began to spill down Talia's cheeks. This is crazy, she whispered. Yes, he agreed. Completely insane. I have a 3-day-old baby and no idea what I'm doing. We'll figure it out. You're my boss. I'm willing to discuss alternative arrangements. I'm scared, she admitted, the words barely audible. Cole leaned forward in his chair, close enough to touch but careful to maintain the distance she might need. So am I, he said, but I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Maya stirred in Talia's arms, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Tahlia looked down at her daughter's perfect face, then back up at Cole, this man who'd appeared in her darkest hour like something from a fairy tale, offering not just rescue but partnership. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it right. No rushing, no assuming, no shortcuts. Maya comes first, always. Always, Cole agreed without hesitation. And we take it slow, really slow. I need time to figure out who I am as a mother before I can figure out who I am with someone else. As slow as you need. Tahlia studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity, any hint that this was just some rescue fantasy that would fade when the reality of sleepless nights and dirty diapers set in. All she saw was patience, determination, and something that looked dangerously like love. Okay, she said finally, the word barely more than a breath. Okay? Okay, let's see what happens when we stop pretending this is just professional courtesy. Cole's smile was like sun breaking through storm clouds. Okay, he said. We'll see what happens. Outside the hospital window, Chicago hummed with its usual energy, millions of people rushing toward their own destinies, most of them unaware that in room 314, 2 people had just decided to stop running from theirs. 3 weeks later, Tahlia stood in her Lincoln Park apartment, holding Maya against her shoulder while staring at the chaos that had become her life. Baby supplies covered every surface. Bottles, blankets, tiny clothes in various stages of cleanliness. The elegant, minimalist space she'd carefully curated over years of building her career now looked like a nursery had exploded in it. Maya had been fussy all morning, rejecting her bottle and crying with the desperate urgency of someone whose needs weren't being met. Tahlia had tried everything: feeding, changing, rocking, walking, singing lullabies in 3 different languages. But her daughter remained inconsolable. Come on, sweetheart, Tahlia whispered, swaying gently. Tell Mama what you need. But Maya's only response was another wail that seemed to pierce straight through Talia's already frayed nerves. The exhaustion was crushing. 3 weeks of interrupted sleep, of learning to navigate motherhood without a manual, of carrying the weight of responsibility for another human life. The doorbell rang, and Tahlia felt a wave of relief so intense it almost brought tears to her eyes. Cole had been texting throughout the morning, checking on them, offering to stop by after his morning meetings. She'd tried to tell him she was fine, that she didn't need help, but her pride had finally succumbed to desperation. Thank God, she breathed, hurrying to the door with Maya still crying against her shoulder. But when she opened it, her relief transformed into horror. Standing in her hallway wasn't Cole Bennett. It was Cole Martinez, her ex, holding flowers and wearing the sheepish expression of a man who'd finally worked up the courage to face his mistakes. Hello, Tahlia, Cole Martinez said, his voice carrying the same smooth charm that had once made her heart skip beats. Now it just made her stomach clench with a mixture of anger and disgust. She stood frozen in the doorway, Maya's cries seeming to grow louder in the sudden tension. This man, this coward who'd walked away when she needed him most, was standing at her door holding grocery store carnations like they could somehow erase 4 months of abandonment. What are you doing here? Her voice was ice, every syllable sharp enough to cut. I wanted to see her, he said, his dark eyes moving to the crying bundle in her arms. My daughter. The possessiveness in those 2 words made Talia's maternal instincts flare like a wildfire. Your daughter? She repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. You lost the right to call her that when you told me to take care of the problem. Cole Martinez had the decency to wince. I was scared, Tahlia. I handled it badly. Badly? The word came out as a harsh laugh. You didn't handle it badly, Cole. You didn't handle it at all. You ran. Maya's cries intensified, as if she could sense her mother's distress. Tahlia bounced gently, trying to soothe her daughter while keeping her eyes on the man who'd shattered her world. I'm here now, he said, stepping closer. I want to make this right. Now? Talia's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Now that the hard part is over, now that she's here and healthy and perfect. Where were you when I was throwing up every morning for 3 months? Where were you when I was terrified about labor? Where were you 3 weeks ago when she was born? I was figuring things out, he said defensively. For 4 months? It took you 4 months to figure out that abandoning a pregnant woman was wrong? The sound of footsteps in the hallway made them both turn. Cole Bennett appeared around the corner, carrying a bag that smelled like Thai food, and wearing an expression that shifted from concern to dangerous calm as he took in the scene. Am I interrupting something? He asked, his voice deceptively mild. Cole Martinez's eyes widened as he took in the tall, imposing figure approaching them. Who's this? A friend, Tahlia said quickly, then looked at Cole Bennett with gratitude so intense it was almost painful. Cole, this is Maya's biological father. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop several degrees. Cole Bennett's green eyes assessed Cole Martinez with the cold precision of a predator sizing up potential prey. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of quiet authority that made grown men in boardrooms nervous. The one who walked away, he said. It wasn't a question. Look, I don't know who you are, Cole Martinez said, puffing up slightly, but this is between me and Tahlia. Family business. Family? Cole Bennett stepped closer, and suddenly Cole Martinez seemed smaller, less significant. Where exactly were you when your family needed you? The confrontation was making Maya cry harder, and Tahlia felt her own composure beginning to crack. Stop, she said firmly. Both of you, you're upsetting her. Cole Bennett immediately stepped back, his expression softening as he looked at the distressed baby. I'm sorry, he said gently. Here, let me. Without waiting for permission, he set down the food bag and reached for Maya. The moment she was in his arms, her cries began to quiet. He held her with practiced ease, swaying slightly, humming under his breath. Cole Martinez stared at the scene with obvious shock. How does he know how to do that? Practice, Cole Bennett said without looking at him. Something you acquire when you don't run away from responsibility. You have kids? Martinez asked. Not yet, Cole Bennett replied, his eyes meeting Tahlia's over Maya's head. But I'm learning. The implication in those words, the promise of a future, of commitment, of everything Cole Martinez had refused to offer, hit Tahlia like a physical blow. This was what partnership looked like. This was what it meant to show up. I want to be part of her life, Cole Martinez said suddenly, desperation creeping into his voice. I have rights. Rights? Tahlia's voice was deadly quiet. What rights? You're not on her birth certificate. You never answered when I tried to contact you. You have no legal claim to anything. I'm her biological father. That has to count for something. Biology doesn't make you a father, Cole Bennett said, still holding Maya, who had now settled into contented silence. Being there does. Caring does. Showing up when it's hard does. Cole Martinez's face flushed with anger. And you think you're her father? You think you can just walk into their lives and replace me? I'm not trying to replace you, Cole Bennett said calmly. You were never here to be replaced. The truth of those words hit Cole Martinez visibly. He looked at Tahlia, at Maya, peaceful in another man's arms, at the domestic scene that should have been his if he'd had any courage at all. Tahlia, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Please, I made a mistake. I want to fix this. For a moment, looking at his face, Tahlia almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then she remembered the months of fear, of wondering how she'd manage alone, of crying herself to sleep while carrying his child. You can't fix this, she said quietly. You can't undo 4 months of abandonment with flowers and regret. You can't erase the fact that when I needed you most, you weren't just absent. You were cruel. So that's it? You're just going to keep my daughter from me? I'm going to protect my daughter, Tahlia corrected firmly. From disappointment, from inconsistency, from anyone who sees her as an obligation instead of a gift. Cole Martinez looked between Tahlia and Cole Bennett, seeming to finally understand that he'd lost more than just a relationship. lost his chance at a family he'd never valued until it was gone. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," Cole Bennett said quietly, still holding Maya. "And if you want to dispute that, I suggest you get a very good lawyer, because I promise you, any legal battle you start will be the last mistake you make regarding this family." The quiet menace in his voice was unmistakable. Cole Martinez looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Cole Bennett's expression made him think better of it. "Fine," he said finally, "but someday she's going to want to know who her real father is." "She'll know," Tahlia said, her voice steady. "She'll know her real father is the man who was there when she needed him. The man who didn't run when things got difficult. The man who chose to love her even when he didn't have to." Her eyes met Cole Bennett's as she spoke, and something passed between them. An understanding, a commitment, a promise of the future they were building together. Cole Martinez left without another word, and Tahlia sagged against her doorframe as the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade. "Are you okay?" Cole Bennett asked softly, still holding Maya. "I am now," she said, and meant it. "How did you know to come?" "You stopped responding to my texts. That's not like you." The simple observation, that he knew her well enough to recognize when something was wrong, made her chest tighten with emotion. "Thank you," she said, "for everything you said, for how you handled that, for being here," he finished gently. "For being here," she agreed. Cole Bennett looked down at Maya, who had fallen asleep in his arms. "She's exhausted. She's been crying all morning. I couldn't figure out what she needed." "Sometimes what they need is just to know they're safe," he said, "that someone's got them." The words applied to more than just Maya, and they both knew it. Tahlia studied his face, this man who'd appeared in her life like an answer to prayers she hadn't known she was praying. "Cole," she said softly, "yeah? I think I'm falling in love with you." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and terrifying and inevitable. Cole Bennett's green eyes met hers, and she saw her own feelings reflected back. The wonder, the fear, the absolute certainty that what was happening between them was worth every risk. "I think I fell in love with you the night Maya was born," he said quietly. "When I saw you holding her, when I realized what strength really looked like." "This is crazy," she whispered, echoing their conversation from the hospital. "The best things usually are," he replied. Maya stirred in his arms, and Cole Bennett looked down at her with an expression of such tenderness it took Talia's breath away. "She's ours," he said softly, as if testing the words. "She's ours," Tahlia agreed. And for the first time since Maya's birth, she felt like they truly were a family. The autumn light filtering through Talia's apartment windows had the golden quality that only came in October, warm and rich like honey. Maya sat in her high chair, her dark eyes bright with curiosity as she examined a piece of banana with the serious concentration of a scientist studying a new discovery. "No, no, sweetheart," Tahlia laughed, gently redirecting Maya's hand away from her hair and toward her mouth. "Food goes here, remember?" At 7 months old, Maya was a force of nature contained in a tiny body. She had her mother's intelligence and determination, along with what Cole insisted was his stubborn streak, though Tahlia pointed out that stubbornness was definitely a Richardson family trait. The sound of a key in the lock made both mother and daughter look toward the door expectantly. Maya's face lit up with pure joy, her whole body wiggling with excitement. "Dada," she squealed, the word clear and unmistakable. Cole Bennett walked through the door, still wearing his suit from work, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. The transformation that came over his face when he saw them never failed to take Talia's breath away. The way his entire being seemed to brighten, the soft smile that was reserved only for them. "There's my girl," he said, dropping his briefcase and moving straight to Maya's high chair. "Did you have a good day with Mama?" Maya babbled an extensive response in her own language, gesturing with banana-covered hands. Cole listened with the serious attention he usually reserved for board meetings, nodding and making appropriate responses. "Is that so?" he said gravely. "And what did you think about that?" More babbling, this time with what sounded suspiciously like laughter. "She's been practicing that all day," Tahlia said, moving into Cole's arms for their customary greeting kiss. "I think she knows exactly what she's saying, even if we don't." "She's brilliant," Cole said, as if this was an established scientific fact. "Just like her mother." 6 months of this, 6 months of coming home to each other, of shared morning routines and bedtime stories, of middle-of-the-night feedings where they took turns, so neither of them faced the exhaustion alone. 6 months of building a family from love and choice rather than obligation and accident. "How was the Hartwell meeting?" Tahlia asked, settling Maya back in her high chair and returning to the kitchen where dinner was simmering. "Productive," Cole said, loosening his tie completely. "They approved your modifications to the design." The client specifically mentioned how impressed they were with the innovative use of space. Pride swelled in Tahlia's chest. Over the past months, as she'd transitioned back to work part-time, Cole had made sure her contributions to projects were recognized and valued. He'd also quietly restructured her role to allow for more flexible hours and the ability to work from home when needed. "Speaking of work," Cole continued, his voice carrying a note of careful neutrality, "I had an interesting conversation with David Harrison today." Tahlia looked up from stirring the sauce. David Harrison was the senior partner at Harrison Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious architectural firms. "He's heard about your work on the Hartwell project," Cole said, "and the Morrison Hotel. He wants to meet with you." "Meet with me?" "He's looking for a senior architect to head up their new sustainable design division. It would be a significant promotion, more money, more creative control. And completely separate from Bennett Construction," Tahlia finished, understanding immediately. Cole nodded. "No conflict of interest, no questions about our relationship affecting professional decisions." It was an incredible opportunity, the kind of career advancement Tahlia had dreamed about for years. But it would also mean leaving Bennett Construction, leaving the daily professional connection that had brought her and Cole together. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think you're too talented to limit yourself because of us," Cole said firmly. "This is your career, Tahlia, your dreams. I won't be the reason you don't pursue them." The generosity in his words, the way he put her ambitions ahead of his own convenience, made her love him even more fiercely than she already did. "And what about us?" she asked. "If I'm not working for you anymore? Then we're just Cole and Tahlia and Maya," he said simply. "A family, no complications, no conflicts of interest, no reason to hold back." He moved closer, his hands finding her waist. "No reason not to do this," he said, and kissed her with the kind of intensity that still made her knees weak after all these months. Maya chose that moment to bang her spoon against her high chair, making them break apart laughing. "Dada, Mama," she announced, as if reminding them she was still there. "Yes, sweetheart," Cole said, turning to her with a grin. "We see you." As they settled into their evening routine, dinner and bath time and stories, Tahlia found herself watching Cole with Maya and marveling at how natural it all seemed. This man who'd been alone for so long, who'd built his life around work and professional achievements, had adapted to fatherhood like he'd been born for it. Later, after Maya was asleep and they were curled together on the couch, Tahlia brought up the job offer again. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. Harrison Associates would mean longer hours, more travel. "It might be harder to balance everything." "We'll figure it out," Cole said, his arm tightening around her. "We always do." "And you're really okay with me not working for you anymore? No more daily meetings, no more professional collaboration?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" he said finally. "Always. The first time I noticed you, really noticed you, wasn't during a work meeting or a project review." Tahlia turned to look at him curious. "It was about a year ago. You were in the break room, making coffee, and you were on the phone with someone. Your mother, I think. You were speaking in what I assume was French, and you were laughing about something." "You speak French?" "Enough to know you were telling her about some disaster with your apartment's heating system. But the way you laughed," he paused. "I stood in the hallway for 5 minutes just listening to you be happy about a broken radiator because it gave you an excuse to call your mom." The memory made Talia's chest warm. "You never said anything. You were an employee. I was your boss. There were boundaries. And now?" Cole's smile was soft and sure. "Now you're the woman I love, and Maya's the daughter of my heart, and boundaries are things we get to choose together." He shifted, reaching into his jacket pocket, which brings me to something I've been wanting to discuss. Talia's heart stopped as Cole pulled out a small velvet box. "Cole," she breathed. "I know it's only been 6 months, he said, his voice suddenly uncertain in a way she'd never heard before. I know this all started in the most unconventional way possible, but I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life coming home to you and Maya. I want to teach her to ride a bike and help her with her homework and walk her down the aisle someday." Tears were already streaming down Talia's face as he opened the box, revealing a ring that was somehow exactly what she would have chosen, elegant and unique, with a center stone that caught the light like captured starfire. "I want to adopt Maya officially," he continued. "I want my name on her birth certificate alongside yours. I want her to grow up knowing she was chosen and wanted and loved fiercely by both her parents." "Cole," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Tahlia Richardson," he said, sliding off the couch to kneel in front of her. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be Maya's father and your husband? Will you take this crazy, beautiful risk with me?" Through her tears, Tahlia saw everything they'd built together. The trust, the love, the family they'd created from a mistaken text message and two lonely hearts finding each other. She saw the future stretching ahead of them, full of possibilities and challenges and the kind of deep, abiding love she'd stopped believing in. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." As Cole slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Tahlia heard a soft sound from the baby monitor. Not crying, just the gentle sigh of a child settling deeper into sleep, safe and secure in the knowledge that she was loved. Outside the windows, Chicago sparkled in the autumn darkness, a city of millions where two people had found their way to, each other against impossible odds, where a wrong number had become the most right thing in both their lives. "I love you," Tahlia whispered against Cole's lips. "I love you too," he replied. "Both of you. Always." And in the peaceful quiet of their home, with their daughter sleeping safely down the hall and their whole future stretching ahead, of them bright with promise, Tahlia marveled at the beautiful unpredictability of life, how the darkest moments could lead to the brightest joy, and how sometimes the most perfect families were born not from planning, but from love brave enough to answer when destiny called. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. See you next time.